Welcome everyone to another episode of Low Brass U Live. I figured we might start a new trend of playing a little bit right on top. So I'm your host, Zach Marley, and we also have our co-host, Connor Eisenmenger.
Hello.
So we've got a good show for you today, hopefully, and voice crack. It's hard to play and then immediately start start talking. But anyway, hopefully we have a good show for everyone. Again, as usual, if you have comments or questions or anything, feel free to leave them in there, and we'll hopefully get those on screen. Just a couple of housekeeping things. We've got, I put the links in the description below this time for both the Discord link, the Discord server, and also the t-shirts, which the first t-shirt purchase has been made. So someone's floating around there with Low Brass U merch. And some Low Brass U stickers. So if you want to get yourself a Low Brass U shirt, we got hoodies, we got a mug. You have that water bottle handy, Connor?
I sure don't. Sorry about that. I forgot.
Literally have two of them, and you can't even have one on screen.
I know. I actually, not only do I not have the water bottle, I have an incorrect water bottle.
Yeah, that'll need to not be on screen. But
I'll hide it.
Since we've got one comment now, just to double check to make sure everything is working, let's make sure. And Mr. Lemon sounds good. Thank you. So
yeah, you really just had to throw that one on the screen, didn't you?
I really didn't think about how that had to do with my playing because I didn't see it until now. It didn't click for me. But yeah, I think that might be how we start shows from now on. I'll do a little bit of playing, and we'll see how it goes. So a little live playing like I used to do on some of the live streams.
Do it live.
So
yeah.
Wrong notes and all. Little tired from accidentally doing what I thought I would never do in bringing the wrong instrument to the gig. So I texted Connor a little bit about this as I realized it earlier today. And because of Easter and things, I had my large bore in my case, and I basically only use one case now because I have one that I really like, and then I have other cases that I tolerate. So no matter what type of tenor trombone I'm playing, I put it in the same case. And so I took that the small bore tenor trombone that I usually play on like pop and jazz gigs. I took that out to put my large bore inside there for Easter Sunday. And then, of course, like a fool, I did not take it out of the case, and because I generally practice other horns that are out in my office, which is probably not the best thing to do. But yeah, I accidentally brought the wrong trombone to the gig and had to play on a large bore for something I didn't really intend on bringing a large bore for. But you know what? You make it work. If you want that check to still clear. You got to just figure out a way to do it. But maybe as just because that's the first time I've ever done something like that. I mean, yeah, maybe forgot my mouthpiece here and there. Have you ever brought the wrong instrument or something like that, Connor?
Let me tell you about the many times that I have brought the wrong instrument to the job. So there was one time, first time it ever happened to me with like any actual like repercussions outside of like school and just like a little whoopsie, was a cover band gig in Houston. I brought the wrong trombone and did the same exact thing. But that was a little more stressful because it was like kind of mercenary work where I didn't know the book, and it was like you needed things to speak right the first time without even knowing what was really going on.
Right.
And having a large board didn't help with that. But what it did help with was, at the time, the big bass line thing that we got to play was what's it called? Shake It Off. The Barry sax line. That sounds really good on a large bore. I think that they should maybe consult a digitally remastered. If they ever redo that record, I would maybe consider trombone on the bottom end.
I definitely hoped that got called today, and it did not. Because I was even thinking about taking some of it down the octave, because now you got that trigger low C that you didn't have before.
Right.
And that was, I was definitely hoping that was going to get called, but we only played one set. It was like one 90-minute set at like outside the Rangers stadium, or what is it, MetLife or Global Life? Something Life. We're definitely living.
Life is for the living.
Right. So yeah, it definitely was not ideal. And if it was a longer gig, I think I would have been in a much worse situation. But since it was
90 minutes is about what you can do to muscle that out.
Right. And, we definitely played some things. We played, especially 90 minutes. It's a pretty high energy 90 minutes. A lot of playing and things. I had to play some high E's on that large bore, which I wasn't sure what was going to come out the other side, but most of it went okay. But that's actually really funny that Mr. Lemon here brought a green mouthpiece to a gig and didn't know there was going to be a green screen.
That's good.
That's rich. That's pretty surprising that like you'd have a gig that would have a green screen, but that's pretty funny. I bet that looked pretty ridiculous.
That was probably very confusing to the visually, but that's a good consideration.
Right.
If you want to green screen out the trombone mouthpiece, at least I guess that would be probably a Kelly mouthpiece if I had to guess.
Yeah, I would assume so.
Nice. Other time that I had a blunder like that where I brought the wrong instrument happened very recently. The dumbest time that I've done this was like a low stakes environment. We were just reading for fun. We were doing brass quintet and calling tunes and just hanging outside at a park locally here in the old Northwest. And not only did I bring the wrong trombone, I brought the correct bell section and the wrong slide position or section.
Ooh.
And so they
didn't mate at all?
Not even remotely. So if anyone's ever wondering, if you buy a Bach 42 and you wonder, I wonder if I could put a Yamaha Zeno slide on this, I'm here to tell you you can't. Don't waste your money.
Yeah, I mean, you could do some alterations to get it there, but definitely, from the jump, probably not. Yeah. The other thing that I think that made it more challenging than anything was not just having a large board, but also, I played on a 5 instead of a 12 today. So.
Wow.
Had I've known, and what I used to always keep a 6 in my case for large board, but I stopped using it so many years ago. But it stayed in my case longer than me using it, and I really wish that was in there, because that was always my like pretend it's a small bore mouthpiece and play a 6, like it's gonna make the world of difference from a 5 to a 6. But yes, so it wouldn't hurt anything, that's for sure. But it's Game Time 47 says, where can I get that awesome shirt? You can get this awesome shirt at the link in the description, but I will also throw that link in the chat here. Maybe I'll pin it.
Do a little pin.
Little pin.
Little pin action. There you go.
So there it
in the
be.
chat.
In the chat.
Outstanding.
And it's below also, along with the Discord server. But Harrison says, remember when you guys had said to hold up 4 fingers when you hit the 5th measure of the rest of the band, and I tried it and it worked. Awesome.
Very good.
Some pretty, light, jokes around the low brass world is always nice.
There you go. Yeah, a little friendly fun. I hope it was all in good spirits. Hope we all had a goof and a gaff, and it sounds like you successfully got someone to come in and measure early. And now what you've done is actually great. You've learned an important lesson. Both of you have. You've learned that, anyone can instigate and stir the pot or send misinformation across an ensemble. So the person who got tricked now knows to trust their ears probably more than their eyes, or at least keep a really strict counting brain. Because sometimes, I know I've sat in orchestras before where I look to my left and the tuba's got measure 5, and I look to my right and the trumpet has 7, and I think, one of you is right. One of you might be referencing rehearsal numbers that I don't see in my part.
Right.
There could be conflicting data, so I need to really, really compare. Like it's possible that both are correct in reference to their parts. I need to figure out where I am, and it doesn't really matter where the first trumpet player is. It doesn't really matter. Well, I mean, it does, because you got to come in together, but it's great if we're all correct, even if that means being correct in our own way.
And what is that? There's some statistic about how misinformation spreads faster than accurate information on the internet these days.
I have absolutely no idea.
But yeah, that's a good example of that, of just like throwing up the wrong measure number and people kind of freaking out.
And it's an honest mistake that you can make. And like, I know that I will throw up wrong measure numbers unintentionally. But now we know you can also just do it for fun.
Right.
So just another reason to stay on top of it.
Yeah, that's definitely something.
Sip.
Yeah,
that was good.
Need to do them separately, but anyway, yeah, that's something, especially when I'm playing an orchestra. I write in all kinds of helpful things to help me keep track of measures, just to be sure. I do with solo performances too. I kind of always assume that performance me is not very smart. like in that moment, there might be some nerves or something that kind of makes, throws you off your game or something like that. And that to me is just like, I want to have it be as simple as possible. That the pianist left hand, like I'll write little things in my like solo parts that just like LH, quarter notes or something like that. The little things like that really help me and make everything just a little bit easier for me. And I probably don't need all of them, but it's always helpful.
I don't know. I think those are particularly helpful in the context of performance. Like when you're playing something for like a jury or you're just doing like solo repertoire, when you're actually getting down to it, if you've prepared in a way that you feel performance ready, there's probably going to be very, very little, if not no, note reading. Right. Whereas like when I'm playing like for a jury piece or something like that, the only thing I'm looking for is like gestural sort of motions of like, so I know where I am. And usually if I'm looking at the music to see where I am, it's to see where I am in relation to what's going on on the piano or whatever the accompaniment may be, because you're having a dialogue with that. And that's more important than just, the notes on the page. So I think having notes about what the piano is doing or what the accompanist is doing is probably more important game day than actually what's on the page.
If you don't have it written in your part, you need to know it, because one of the things that happened to me, I remember my senior tuba recital at UNT. I remember, I think it was my senior. It was one of my recitals. I did a couple as an undergrad for tuba, and I remember the pianist jumped ahead on me. Like they skipped some. I don't know if they skipped a line.
Yeah.
But I knew exactly where they were. It was a really awkward moment because I was about to turn the page, but they were already on the next page of where I thought. Where I heard them playing. So I like was holding a note and flipped the page and then like started playing a new section that was not what I had to jump ahead. And those those sorts of things are really important to make sure you're kind of on top of. But yeah, it definitely can happen. But yeah, let's see. We got a couple other comments to get through. Mr. Anonymous.
While you're reading those, I want to say one quick thing about that. So you can go ahead. You can troll through the comments while I say this. I was thinking about this recently. Like I don't do a lot of solo trombone repertoire. Actually, I do zero these days. But one thing that I remember being critically helpful for those moments, because even an amazing accompanist can skip a bar. Even a good soloist might skip a bar and get off. It just happens.
Right.
You got to account for pilot error.
Humans make mistakes, believe it or not.
Yeah, it's fine. And one of the things that I think was the most beneficial for my success in my juries, because I traditionally did well and I felt prepared, and even if things rarely got off because of little things. One of the things I remember was being able to sing everything the piano or the orchestra production was playing in those big multi-measure rests where you don't play, so that I could sing exactly what the piano player was going to play right before I come in, so that I could come in even if they missed 8 bars, if they skip a page, if they, it could be catastrophic error. And if I know when I come in based on the sound of it, I don't need to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. I don't ever remember counting rests in a jury or anything like that in college, because by that time it was just kind of singing it in my head.
Yeah, I think that's really important to just, again, mistakes happen. Human error is real. And it goes away to some extent. We all get kind of better as we progress through this, but I've made bonehead errors. It just happens, unfortunately. But Blonde Curly Boy says Low Brass U merch corrected on the next one. Yep, we got Low Brass U merch now. So if you want to follow that link, you can get. I've got the classic short sleeve T-shirt on. Connor's wearing the long sleeve tee. I opted for short sleeve because Texas is hot, and I didn't want to deal with a long sleeve shirt. I'm sure part of the year I'd want the long sleeve shirt, and maybe I'll get one. But
like 2 weeks out of the year,
right? So yeah, especially because like I have multiple computers on. I've got a light that's producing a lot of heat. I'm rarely going to be cold. That's for sure. So Harrison says, also, I'm playing euphonium for a performance next week. I just got a euph and the 4th valve after being cleaned and oiled is still sticking. Is there anything I can do? Yeah, that's not the ideal situation, certainly. if you've already cleaned it, I mean, you might try cleaning it again. I know that sounds, doing the same thing, expecting a different result, but maybe, being really thorough with your cleaning of it. You might also try an even thicker valve oil. In general, we don't want to use a really thick oil, but using a slightly thicker oil might kind of, gum it up a little bit, but it might be more likely to go up and down. But it could have been, especially if it's a compensating horn with the fourth valve on the side, those often get bumped, and then there's some problems that way. So sometimes, if you really know what you're doing, you can visually see that maybe the stem is not at a perfect angle, and you can kind of try to correct it that way. That's not something I totally recommend doing if you're unsure of things. But I've done that. That's one of those things where occasionally I'll see it in a student's instruments, and I'll just be like, look that way, and I'll just pull it a little bit, and just kind of try to make it, adjust it by sight. But yeah.
That being said,
yeah,
if it is something that can be adjusted by sight, then a local instrument repair shop or a band instrument dealer would be happy to do that for probably a very small base repair fee, if anything.
Right. Yeah, and also just inspecting the valve, does it look like it has a lot of plating wear? This is why we own our own instruments and deal with things that way, because then you're responsible for making sure that it's working properly. But instruments do malfunction and things, so maybe trying a different valve oil might help. But yeah, you might just be out of luck on that one. Let's see. Mr. Anonymous says, have I heard of the tuba and flute duet called Fantasy? Is that the one by Walter Hartley? I don't know what that one's called. There aren't many tuba and flute duets, believe it or not. But maybe that's what that one's called.
I'm unfamiliar.
No, that one's called Duet for Flute and Tuba. Very creative.
Yeah, how long they'd sit around and think about that one.
Right. Let's see if I can figure out what Fantasy for Flute and Tuba. Who wrote that? Oh, Ben Miles. I am familiar with this piece. I've never played it. I don't think I've even looked at it, but I do know of this piece because Ben Miles wrote it for him and his wife, I believe. Ben Miles has written a few other tuba pieces, like Contraptions is kind of his most famous composition, which I played a handful of times in competitions and things like that. But yeah, Ben Miles, I really like that Contraptions piece. I don't know this work quite as well, but he's also a good tuba player too, which is kind of nice. Yeah, someone said it's the one by Ben Miles, but I didn't see that in time.
Cool.
Let's see. Finding out that it's more of a challenge. Yeah, I would imagine that that's a pretty serious piece. I know I've heard it, but I just don't remember. Yeah, Harrison's saying the next thickest valve oil after piston would be light rotor. Yeah, there are different piston oils, so you might try a slightly thicker. I would probably start with a thicker piston oil. Depends on what you're using. I know some companies only make one piston oil. But Hetman's makes multiple different ones, and Monster Oil makes multiple different ones. Like I use Monster Oil's Faster, and that that's their thinnest, I think. And so they have, I can't remember what their other ones are called, but that's something that might help. Just going to I'd probably go for a thicker valve piston oil before a light rotor oil. But you are correct in saying that that's kind of the next thickest thing. But Brady Fox says, who I really like, Derek Fenstermacher. Yeah, he's definitely a great tuba player, and he once brought donuts to a recital that he played and gave out donuts to people. So know your audience. I think that's what we all learned. But yeah, Derek Fenstermacher's got a great recording of the Gregson from when he was at Cincinnati Conservatory of Music, and I think he did their concerto competition. But that's a video from a while back, but it's still pretty popular on YouTube. But yeah, he's a great player. But yeah, so let's see. One of the topics that maybe we kind of talked about it a little bit, but maybe just talking a little bit about playing with a pianist, because I think that that's something that I often lecture my students about. Mm-hmm. And one of the big things that I think about, and I don't know if you've heard this or think about things this way, I'm not perfect, but I try to always call the pianist that I'm playing with, kind of already broke the trend, but not my pianist. They're not my person. They're the person who's playing with me, who's graciously playing with me. But I try to refer to them as a collaborative pianist and not a piano accompanist, because an accompanist implies that it's just like, I do my thing, you'll catch up or you won't. Like, I'm not going to listen to you. I'm gonna do my own thing. And I think that that's not the best attitude to have when we're playing with a pianist, especially as low brass players, because, like one of my partner's close friends, she's a pianist, and she refuses to play with low brass players because of bad experiences.
Oh, no.
So I like to be a part of the solution and not the problem, ideally. Again, nobody's perfect, but I think that we can get a bad rap really easily. So I try to always think about, we're trying to play together, which sometimes might mean, this is the tempo that they're comfortable with in this section, and we need to slow it down, or we need to speed it up, or, listen to how they're playing things. Because sometimes you'll end up in a situation where the pianist states an idea first, and then you respond. And to me, I think it's really important that you listen to how they played it and try to interact with that. Not saying you always copy that, verbatim, but I think that that's a pretty helpful thing. I don't know what your experiences have been with pianist, Connor.
Yeah, I absolutely. First off, I'll say I agree with what you say, and I like the idea of changing the verbiage to something that is a more, I like the term collaborative. I like the idea of being on complete creative equals and both parties having autonomy in music making decisions and having agency and what the ultimate performance is going to sound like. Definitely. That being said, I was really, really spoiled for a long time at UNT, or not at UNT, at WKU, of playing with an exceptional piano player almost every single time that I got to do stuff. It was someone who my trombone professor had gone to school with in undergrad, and I think they both went to Cincinnati Conservatory afterwards for grad school at the same time. Then they both ended up living in the same area. She lives in Louisville, and came down and did all of our juries for the trombone studio, and just played so well. And so she was nice enough, and it was good. I kind of started off playing solo trombone. That was my first experience with solo repertoire with piano ever. I didn't know about it until I got to college. So egg on my face, that's fine. But yeah,
I don't know if it's all your fault. There might be some blame on the school.
Sure. But anyways, my relationship with accompanists was, this person is very much my superior as far as like musicality, experience, everything. I was like, I'm going into this room to learn from that piano player about how this song goes.
Right.
And so that's kind of, I was lucky to have that as my formative experience. And so then once my eyes were open to the broader scope of like what piano accompaniment has historically been at the university level, it was kind of interesting to me to think about, oh wow, like there are worlds that are not my own view of this experience that I had.
Right.
So yeah, that's my lens in which I look through this discussion.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I was fortunate enough in college, both at North Texas and Northwestern, the pianist that I played with most of the time, I had played with multiple in both locations, but was someone who knew the literature. And it's a very interesting dynamic of playing this tuba, it's a tuba solo piece or whatever, and you realize that the pianist that you're playing with has played it maybe 50 times and you're playing it for the first time. It's like, who really knows this piece better? Especially, at North Texas, the pianist that plays with the tubas for the most part, she's been playing with tubas at North Texas since she was in grad school, I think, like in the 80s, like mid to late 80s, I think. So, when I pull up the Vaughan Williams, I've played that piece, probably 15, 20 times at this point, but she's probably played it 300, 400, 500, I don't even know, maybe 1,000 times at this point. Because that's just a piece that comes up all of the time. And occasionally I'll think that I've stumped her. I'll play a recital and she's like, oh, have you played this piece? And she's like, oh, I don't think I played that one. And then we get going and she's like, oh, I think I played this on a guest artist recital in I don't know, early 2000s. Oh. It's just, she's played all of them before. So yeah, I think it's very much it's a team sport, and we're all trying to just make it sound better. There are obviously some things that we try to negotiate with that. Sometimes I'm like, is there any way we can maybe go just a little bit faster so I can play this on one breath? Things like that.
Sure.
But there's give and take, and you want them to not hate you. I think that's a really important part. Whenever I play a really difficult piece, like I remember at I can't remember what regional tuba conference. I want to say the Great Plains conference that I played at, years ago at this point. But I played the Franklin Payne Tuba Sonata, which has a terribly hard piano part. And, it's like you get assigned one of the pianists for the festival, and just like, do you like Starbucks? Here's a Starbucks gift card. Please don't hate me for this piece. I know it's awful. But I've been working on it a lot, and I didn't want to learn something else for this. And just like, enjoy coffee on me.
Right. You're going to be up a lot of late nights, so drink some coffee.
Right. And she did a great job, other than the page turner screwing her up, who will remain nameless, but he knows who he is. The page turner turned 2 pages for the first page turn of the piece instead of 1.
That sets you up on the wrong foot.
And it's one of those pieces where, yes, you're on a team together, but you kind of just like both do your job in time together at some level. And I was just like, I can't really help you. Like, either we restart, or I just like, I play consistently and know that you have my part on your page and can maybe figure it out. So I just kind of
keep playing?
I just kept playing.
When did this person lock back up with you? Was it on the second page? I guess you wouldn't know. She didn't have.
I don't know that it really locked up. I think it just kind of was. We kind of ended together.
Man,
it wasn't great, but I mean, it's like, it wasn't really her fault. But it's just it was such a hard piece to begin with. Anyone who knows that piece, it's just. There's no like, I'm gonna make these downbeats clear and solve everything for you. Like, it's kind of all over the place, and there wasn't really much to do. But we got a couple of comments that we neglected. But Brady says, playing with a pianist is awesome because it helps covering my little mess ups, in my opinion. Yeah, and I think, again, they only cover up as much as they want to as, your friend. So keeping them as your friend is really, really important. That's one of the reasons why the pianist that I like playing with at North Texas is my favorite pianist, because she's a kind person in general. So we end up playing things, and yeah, I'll make a mistake. I do from time to time. I'm not perfect. Especially, we played for like a concerto competition. I had to have it memorized. And I had it mostly memorized, but I screwed up one spot, and no one knew but us because she covered it so well. And one, that's a good skill for them, if you're for a pianist to have. But also, it's, she didn't have to do it. She could have just said, this is where we are. You figure it out, and we could have just not ended together. But she didn't do that. So Mr. Anonymous says that they have not played with a pianist before, so can't relate. Yeah, it's something, I think sometimes we take for granted, because, you have to pay a person, or, some schools pay for it. For North Texas, they never paid for anything of that, but at Northwestern, I think you got like your jury and like another performance covered a semester was kind of how it worked. But yeah, it's, it costs money, and you have to have a good pianist around you, which is not always something that, we have access to.
Right.
But Brady says, has anyone heard of this suite for Ellie? And I'm wondering, Brady, if you're talking about Effie Suite with an F, which is a piece for tuba that's pretty popular. It's about Effie the elephant. So maybe that's what you're talking about. If it's Ellie, I haven't heard of that. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That just means I haven't heard of it. So
there you go.
But yeah, Effie Suite's a great piece, and it's kind of fun. It's not completely like tongue in cheek, but it's one of those pieces that is a pretty good choice for like playing to like a kindergarten class or something, because it's all kind of that's Brady. Brady says that's what he meant. So yeah, that it's kind of like a one of the movements is Effie goes to the carnival, Effie takes dancing lessons, Effie falls in love. I think there's a lullaby one also. There's 6 movements. It's been a minute. I played that on my sophomore tuba recital in undergrad, so it's been a little bit since I've played that. But it's definitely kind of, especially you think about an elephant joining a carnival, or like an elephant, taking dancing lessons, and it's kind of clumsy, and it's the tuba, and it's it's a little fun. But
Do you think you'd be interested in playing that for a kindergarten class sometime?
sure.
Sick.
Yeah, fly me up and I'll do it.
We'll get you plugged in.
Right.
Yeah, I'll fly you in.
Zoom me in or something.
Yeah, we'll zoom you in.
But yeah, it's a fun piece, and it's just a good piece. But let's see. Harrison says, playing slurred passages on euphonium, should I still be using a light tongue?
That's a good question.
Why don't you go first, Connor?
I can tell you that I was practicing that today. I mean, I feel like I'm not a euphonium pedagogue necessarily. I can't really be trusted with performance practices in like the Western art music world. But what I can say is that from the very niche world of jazz euphonium or improvised music on the euphonium, I like to have both tools in the toolbox so that I can bring them out when I need to. Specifically today, I was practicing 500 Miles High by the late, great Chick Corea. And I was trying to figure out, I was actually on, I'll be honest, I was practicing on valve trombone today, but I was trying to get the scales under my fingers, all of them starting from like a low B natural. On the valve trombone, of course, I was doing 1, 2, 3. And so I was just kind of ripping it up, like each chord quality from either a B or a B flat, whichever one fit in the scale. But every time before I could pass go and move on to the next chord scale that I wanted to shed, I did it both ways. So I would do eighth notes slurred and then eighth notes articulated. With the end goal, my long-term practice for 500 Miles High, it's about, they claim it's at 126 beats per minute. I know that the Aebersold recording definitely goes faster than that eventually. It may start around 126, but my goal right now, my long-term practice goal, is to be able to play extemporaneous, meaning like off the top of my head, eighth notes, completely slurred, lightly single-tongued, and also do the same with triplets grouped in like 3s and 4s. It's like ba 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 baga daga daga duga daga duga daga da daga da daga duga daga duga da, that sort of thing. But being able to slur and have agency to pick between articulated and slurred. So yeah, probably both. I don't know about like a more, you might say, like classical context. What would you say, Zach?
Yeah, I would say that ideally it's, you shouldn't be using a light tongue, but we live in, not a perfect world. And especially, I assume, Harrison, that you're coming from the trombone side of things, which means you probably haven't practiced slurring quite as much. That's sometimes a thing that we neglect on trombone because, there are times where it makes sense to do it, but, you can almost get away with not doing it. So I would say, ideally, you are not tonguing when it says to slur. Maybe sometimes you add a tongue in there if there's like an accent situation or something like that. There's maybe some reasons to do it, but for the most part, I would say that I personally am trying not to tongue. But what I would also say is that what I care about the most is it sounding good. And if the slur sounds bad, in performance, I would probably give a light tongue. I don't want to do that, but I want it to sound good more than I want. I don't want just like a really bad slur coming out. So there's the other side of that too, is if you always do that, you'll never get good at slurring. And what I kind of did when I was younger, like say high school and even early college and things, I just tongued everything on tuba because as a trombone player, I had a pretty good legato tongue. So I could lightly tongue things and most people wouldn't say anything. And I thought I was fooling everybody. And then I realized one day that I wasn't fooling everyone. And, I felt like I missed a lot of time of practicing that and, practicing getting those slurs to be a little bit better. So that's something that I would say in practice you should be working on getting those to be perfect slurs without a tongue at all. But ultimately, I'm of the mindset that we do what sounds good in context. in a performance setting, I'm not reaching for that, like, let's see if this works out, this, skill works out today. That's not how I live my life. But, you might have time to kind of do some more experimentation and things with that. But I know you said your performance was next week, so, might have to just do
Good
what
luck.
you need to do. Right. Brady says, what I find difficult, slurring on tuba good, especially in the lower range. Yeah, so that's definitely a thing that, most tuba players struggle with slurring, myself included. I think my personal belief is that a perfect slur does not exist, and we're just working towards that. So you might hear me play something and say that's a perfect slur, and I in my head I'm thinking that's a terrible slur. Like I still hear something inside of there. So it's definitely something to work on, and it's important, but it's what makes playing an instrument awesome is that you'll never just like have it solved. To me, but also it's frustrating because it's like I want those slurs to be better. But one of the exercises that I do, which maybe I'll demonstrate that here, because why not do a little bit of demonstration from time to time? We get a little F tuba only because the C tuba is further away. Let's see here. So what I might do is just going back and forth with scales, starting, in this case on F tuba, I'd probably start on F. I might start on like G on C tuba or F on B flat tuba, something like that. And just kind of like this sort of sighing, scale going down into the low range. And for me, I'll just keep doing that down and half steps, which also gets a little bit of, these 5 fingers, all 5 of them going in the low range, especially. That to me is kind of helpful. But again, it's not an overnight thing by any stretch. Let's see here. Airsoft Mickey says, what not to do when playing principal trombone? So there are lots of things probably not to do.
That's probably a good thing to think about. What not to do? I would say the worst thing you can do playing principal is play something one way the first time, play it differently the second time, unless you have been communicated to do so. I think that's like the one rule.
Right. Definitely.
If you're going to follow one rule, consistency.
Right. Definitely being consistent is helpful. So on that kind of note, one thing that I personally will do, because you might make a mistake and not want to play it that way that you played it the first time. And so what I might do is, if I realize that, I'll turn to the person and say, hey, I didn't mean to play it like this. I'm going to play it like this. And, just so I'm not trying to be confusing or something like that.
Right.
So those sorts of things, definitely being really, it's pronounced Mikey. Sorry.
You go.
My mistake. But anyway, making sure that it's, really consistent playing, and also just thinking about like what you would want if you were playing second. Like I try to be pretty, it depends on the situation. It depends on how well I know the people. It depends on what I think they might want. Because I remember this was a long time ago, but I was subbing for someone in orchestra. I was subbing on principal, and I was just in it for a rehearsal. And I played principal trombone in orchestras before, but it's like not, I didn't play with these people. I wasn't on this concert. I was just subbing in a rehearsal. And what they said to me was that it was hard to play with me because I didn't move at all. Like everything I did was just like, laser focused. And it's actually, my partner was playing second trombone in that group. So, and our mutual friend Daniel Marion also. So that was the section. So I was sitting there, subbing and playing, I wasn't leading them into anything. And even though they knew the music and things, they couldn't anticipate where I was going to play without some movement. So that's something nowadays that for the most part, I will have some sort of, physical gesture, not over the top, but something to kind of, it's kind of just like, especially with playing chamber music and things, it's just kind of a tip of the hat of just kind of, hey, this is, we're doing this, and it's kind of, we can all, feel good about it together. So I think that's something to kind of think about, that I learned, not necessarily the hard way, like it wasn't a dramatic thing, but I definitely didn't think about it prior to that point. Being consistent pitch-wise too. Everyone's got different schools of thoughts as far as what direction you tune to. I'm mostly of the mindset in like a section that I will tune to the principal player. And if I'm principal trombone, I would tune to the principal trumpet. My life never feels like I'm a real principal. Seems like there's always a higher up in some context. I'm playing in a big band, listen back to lead trumpet for pitch and things like that. So that's how I've always kind of approached it. So if I'm playing principal and it's a true kind of principal moment, I'm going to be laser focused on just keeping everything really consistent and not wavering and not trying to tune to someone else, because I think that as a person who plays second a lot, or thinking especially as a trombonist, I feel like it's all second, like playing in a horn section or something, I'm second, I'm the only trombone, but I'm second to the trumpet player. And if they're adjusting their slides, like there are so many times on gigs where I see the trumpet player go to move their slide, and I'm just thinking in my head like
oh, no, don't do that.
I was about to move mine. I guess I'll stay put. And then it just like starts my mind kind of racing. And it's not like we're keeping score. Maybe I was in tune and they were out of tune. Maybe the other way around. And it's good to have some sort of like flexibility with things, but it's helpful to sometimes have a clear-cut hierarchy of things.
Right. And it doesn't really matter if like whoever's right or wrong doesn't matter, as long as we all agree to follow who is the leader that we are following.
Right.
There was like the best example I ever heard of this, or like the best like visual analogy for this. I liked how matter of fact it was. This was something that Jay Saunders told us when we were working in big bands at UNT. He was like, look, I think the example was like a trumpet and a saxophone had a unison line, or it might have even been two alto saxophones. I think for the purpose of argument, let's say two alto saxophones. He said, look, like you both are equal in this part. No one really is the lead alto in this unison line. But the fact of the matter is, for big band, if you want it to be in tune, one of you has to stick where you are, and the other one has to actually not only follow that person, but duck down a little bit lower in as far as your decibels. And you're going to be, one person is the pigment and the other person is the shading, even though you're both unison. That's the only way it's really going to be tight, like you hear on big band records. So that's something from the other side of the fence.
Yeah, but I mean, it's playing together is playing together.
Definitely.
And that's the sort of thing. So yeah, there are definitely some things to do when you're principal, some things not to do, and it depends on the situation. I've been in situations where I've been a paid professional with a youth orchestra. That's very different when I have a 14-year-old trombonist sitting next to me who is, not, maybe not the most advanced player in the world. I'm not going to like give them a hard time or anything. I'm just there to make things hopefully easier, things like that. So you get in those sort of situations too. And, I'll help them as much as I can. I help them count and things like that. But then there are other situations where, you might be playing principal and maybe the person playing second is actually who should be playing principal. I've been in that situation as well. Kind of the reverse situation. I remember when I was in high school playing in youth orchestra and they hired Donna Parks, who's the principal trombone in the Louisville Orchestra, to play second to me playing principal. And it's just like, no. Like she definitely, she is the professional. I am the student. But it was youth orchestra, so I should be playing principal because I'm paying for the experience. So it's different then. It's like I wouldn't do the same things when I'm 15 and there's a professional next to me necessarily. So there are all kinds of things to kind of navigate with that. But let's go through a few more things. Let's see. The best part of playing euphonium is being able to wear headphones and watch the stream and practice at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, whatever gets that viewership up, we're very close to getting monetized on YouTube. You have to have 4,000 watch hours in the last 365 days, and we're inching close.
There you go.
So even if I don't know how great your practicing is because you're watching this also, but I definitely appreciate the stream watching.
I will say on the topic of some people say like unless you're focused, you're not practicing. Who was it? One of the trombone players in the Chicago Symphony watches The Simpsons while they practice.
I don't
Do
know
you
the
remember
story.
which
I don't know the story, but is it Jay Friedman, Michael Mulcahy,
I think
Charlie
it was Mulcahy.
Vernon, or is this older than that?
No, I think it's Mulcahy. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I would believe that, knowing what I know of that man. I don't know him super well, but he was a professor at a school that I went to. Although he was not, I wasn't in the trombone studio then. But yeah, I would believe that could definitely be going on. And I practiced while watching like Sports Center a lot as a high school student. Again, I'm not sure if it was beneficial or not, but I had a lot of face time, just playing. I just had Sports Center on mute, playing scales and things. I don't think it's I don't think it's the end of the world, but there's no guarantee it's beneficial. I'll put it that way.
Right. It's like passive practice. Like, it might be fine. Like we can't say that time with horn on face is bad, but are you actually working towards the goals that you want? I mean, if your goal is just to slug an hour in the bank, then congrats. You've definitely done that. And it's possible that you got something beyond that. Like maybe you did at some point concentrate enough on your lip slurs to improve, but there's enough evidence out there that refutes the idea of multitasking. You cannot do two things at once. It is truly impossible.
Right.
And so while I like to think that I got my 10,000 hours in watching anime in high school and undergrad and grad school while I was practicing, I was probably either practicing trombone and ignoring the TV that I was watching, or I was just watching anime with trombone in my hand.
I think the only way that you'll know is if you take quizzes over those specific animes that you were watching.
I will pass them with flying colors.
Then you probably weren't getting the most out of your practicing.
Probably not.
It's game time. I forgot to put one of Game Time's earlier things on here, but I'll put it on now. Should I game? And your name it is Game Time after all. But we're happy that you're here on the stream instead of gaming, or maybe you're doing both. But also, I clicked it twice. There we go. Should I take music theory or jazz band? My first response is it's unfortunate that you have to choose.
Yeah, that's a drag.
But what I will say that I think is, something to consider, you can't learn jazz band on your own. Not really. You need to play with other people to play jazz band music.
It's a good consideration.
Music theory, yes, you'll probably learn it maybe better, depending on your teacher, if you're in a course. But you can learn all that on your own, too, if you're diligent about studying it. And there's plenty of textbooks. There's plenty of YouTube videos explaining things. There's a lot that you can learn on your own with that. And not saying you can't learn about big band music on your own, but you can't really learn how to play third trombone in a big band just from sitting at home.
Right. There's a performance practice. There's a technical skill that you have to acquire in addition to the syntax of it.
Right.
There's lots of facts that you can learn in procedures and things within the world of big band or jazz band. And there are, but once you learn the music theory, you own it. It's in your brain. You don't have to perform music theory. It never has to come out in real time. So maybe, that's a good point that I hadn't even thought about. I was just going to say flip a coin. So I'm glad that you said something first.
Yeah, so it also has to depend on what you want to do, in the future. It's if you're telling me that you want to be a theory professor at the university level in 15 years or whatever, I don't know how much jazz band helps you over music theory. If you tell me you want to be playing, lead trombone in the Airmen of Note in 15 years, probably do jazz band. I think that's something to kind of consider too, is what would mean the most to you. But I think it's fair to say that if they're equal value to you, that you could probably mostly get things from just learning music theory on your own, and asking questions to people that you might know that can maybe help you along with some things. So especially if you have a music theory question, you can always drop it in this chat, and Both
Yeah,
of
we'll
us,
help you.
we probably can help. No
I
guarantees.
did okay. I didn't do exemplary in that regard.
In undergrad, I got A's in every theory class, but I did get a B in RL Skills 3. So, you know, what can I say?
Wow. Toot your own horn on your own stream, why don't you?
Well, you know, what can I say? I just
Right.
I really studied in that class. No, it was an all right class. Music theory was that's a class that kind of appeals to me. I actually applied to being a theory major as an undergrad and got in, but chose not to do it.
Didn't know that.
So yeah, it's like a little known fact. It's probably the only time that I mentioned it on the internet. And if you don't know it, it's definitely a little known fact.
Right.
But yeah, it's like I was accepted in the program and then never did anything and never said that I wasn't doing it, just never did it. So
That's one way to do it.
right, just kind of ghost.
Just to not.
But let's see. I think we're kind of going on another tangent. I didn't realize that some of you all know each other, which is kind of an interesting idea.
There are communities that are connected within chat world that are completely exterior to our low brass
right.
universe.
But Mikey is expecting a RuneScape stream soon. Are you saying that we are the RuneScape stream that is happening soon? I don't think I've ever actually played RuneScape. I know
You're
that it
missing
exists, but
It's fun.
I think I missed my window to get into it.
No, you didn't. It's outstanding. They have it on your phone now. You can play just straight up RuneScape on your device. It's like a little clunky, just like it doesn't translate super well in my opinion because there's so much small text and moving around anything. I don't do well with like mobile games. I'm not coordinated enough for it. But I did try it out for like a hot second over winter break this year. I tried the RuneScape mobile thing, and it was a hoot. I think I like fished for some shrimps, and then I gave up because I got bored.
Maybe we'll do some sort of like special stream at some like milestone or something where we'll like play some video game. Like, well, it's game time saying, do you play Fortnite? I have never once played Fortnite. I assume that that's the same for you, Connor, but
I haven't tried it. I've had countless kindergarten through 5th grade students recommend it to me pretty much daily. Haven't cracked yet, but maybe I'll try it one day soon if
maybe
the timing is right.
That's a stream where we just play like 1v1, which maybe you can do in Fortnite. I don't know. Just like we just live stream our Fortnite game. But yeah, no, you play old school or RS3. I don't even know what either of those things are.
Old school RuneScape, I think is what they were referencing.
Oh, okay. Or RuneScape 3. I see.
That's what I would guess.
None of those things mean anything to me.
I don't know what the other ones are. All I know is the old one because that's what was existing when I was in like 6th grade, the first time that I tried RuneScape.
But Jay says, what are some good bass bone jazz pieces? So are we talking about like features for bass trombone or just like, you know, ones that have interesting bass trombone parts? This is kind of a separate discussion. But
you can answer that separately.
But yeah, you mean some of the features that just off the top of my head, making Whoopi's a great one. And
there you go.
What's the other one? Saturday Night is the loneliest night
the
of the week.
loneliest night of the week.
Those two are two that I can think of off the top of my head. I know there are some others. There's the Wave, the Buddy Rich Wave thing. That chart. Do you know that one, Connor?
I'm familiar. I'm aware of it.
Yeah, it's not my favorite thing, but it's
something that features the bass trombone. Sure.
Right. There's definitely some other things. It's hard for me to think now about like which ones have great parts. I always just like look for the spots that I can like, you know, jazz it up with Zatarans, you know, just like give it a little gas. Because I feel like that's with like bass trombone and a big band, it's like and really all music is like this to me. I kind of like think about it like a lot of what we do is like not that we're not in the forefront, and then we have these moments where we can put a little sauce on it, give it a little something extra. And I just live for those moments. Just waiting for, especially playing lead trombone in a big band, just waiting to play without the trumpet section. Because I'm of the mindset that when you play with the trumpet section, you do what they're doing. When you're playing unison rhythms, you do all the things that they do, and then you get that moment where you're like without them and just give all of the sauce.
Definitely. Yeah, that's why we're here. That's the low brass universe. If you think where is the low brass universe, it's when the trumpets aren't playing in big band. That's when it happens.
And bass trombone has those moments too, where you go from so much of bass trombone land in big band is fourth or fifth tenor trombone in the section where you're just playing the lowest harmony of these things, but then you get kind of like a ba-do ba ba, like the rest of the section like comes in or something like that. Knowing those spots, I guess I would say that when you have independent lines, that's where I kind of like focus on,
come out of the texture.
Right. I try to play with others really well, and then there are these moments that like I know that I can get something, I can get a little moment, and I will take that moment almost every single time.
Well, yeah, you're using your identity as a trombone player to serve the overall composition and move the story along of the chart, and it's a high efficacy moment. You feel really important and valued in the ensemble because you are being like the sound of your trombone is being celebrated, or you as a section. I say that kind of like the royal you.
Right.
Anyways. Other instances of good bass trombone specifically coming out of the texture or the bass trombone being celebrated, one big band writer to check out would be Tom Matta from Chicago, who's pretty prolific and a lot of...
I wonder why he writes so many great bass trombone parts.
Yeah, the story is funny because I was playing a long time. I think the longest residency in any big band I've ever played in is probably the Blue Shift Big Band in Chicago, or St. Charles, Illinois. So we're going to be really specific about our venue. But we also played it's called Buddy Guy's Legends or whatever. I can't remember the name specifically of the venue. That was like our regular in-town thing. But anyways, what was I saying? Bass trombone parts, Tom Matta. It was always this moment, like every set there was some chart. It wasn't always the same. There was like a few of them, but every night there was at least one moment where I looked over at our friend Nick Roach playing bass trombone because he just came out of the texture, and it was like this great like boom bam boom. Then we have a big chord, and you look over and you're just like, man, the bass trombone is the hero. All of a sudden in the middle of the shout chorus, how did that happen? Like that had to have been very clever writing, like where the bass trombone comes in with like a really low valve or pedal note that is like the funny note of the chord, and they anticipate the entire brass section, types of writing like that. Anyways, it was always Tom Matta arrangements, and Tom Matta is a bass trombone player in the Chicago area and fantastic player and evidently a great writer and knows where to put the bass trombone. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, because part of it, a lot of writers don't really know what makes the bass trombone different, and it's confusing because it's you talk to like your saxophone player friend or worse, someone from the rhythm section. They don't understand what our instruments do for the most. There are some that are great at it. I'm not saying that they're all that way, but what makes a bass trombone different than a tenor trombone to someone who doesn't play it? It's like, well, I guess it has more range, but it's the same. It's more or less the same range until the valve range, and it's just it just gets complicated. And I feel like they're afraid of making a mistake in writing something that's impossible, and they end up just kind of not writing anything super fun. But yeah, I always am looking for those spots that I can kind of jump out of the texture. And those moments happen on second and third trombone too. They're few and far between. Don't get me wrong. But especially playing like second or third trombone, you might have an interior movement or something like that where you change and nobody else does, and like that's like, to me, that's like my moment. Like, just like that half step motion going from like something like where you have like the 7 resolving to the 3 or something like that. Just like that sort of moment is like my favorite just little thing to get. So yeah, you can also play a whole concert and not have any of those moments on bass trombone. So it's definitely not a given, but we try to find those moments as often as we can. One other time that I will kind of, you can make some alterations to some big band charts. I think that is done more often than it should be, probably. But there are some times where I'll do it. Like taking unison lines down the octave is a relatively common and kind of accepted thing. I wouldn't say just always do that, but there's enough times where it kind of makes sense to take something down the octave. Some people will say that's what you should automatically do, and I don't necessarily disagree. But then one thing that I like to do is take like the last note down, assuming you have the root, or play the root, especially if you have like a soft ending, like it's just a soft like pad of like the trombones, then you just like come in on that low note. Another one that just came to my mind is that Airman of Note arrangement of the Grinch. I'm not sure who did that.
That was Baylock.
That was Baylock?
Oh, no, maybe.
I don't
know if it was. That I'm just confusing. That was the concert that he came and conducted us for the very, very first time. I don't know if he arranged it.
Bass trombone. I feel like it's not Alan Baylock, but maybe it isn't. And Alan does write.
I think you're correct.
Alan, he writes good bass trombone parts.
Absolutely. One other to add into that list is the Matt Neese arrangement of I Thought About You. There's a great soli where the bass trombone, I think, is playing the coolest part of the soli, where they're playing a bass line kind of in a two-feel.
I played, because there's like a Capitol Bones arrangement of that, basically the exact same chart. I played that with Nick Roach, actually, many years ago. Let's see. I'm not sure. You can find it, though, if you look for that Airman of Note album. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there are a couple bass trombone features, but there aren't necessarily a ton of them. Let's see. We got a couple of comments I wanted to make sure that I get to. We got Tuba Man back in the chat. We haven't had him in a while. I'm not sure if have you been on streams with Tuba Man, Connor? I feel like he's been away so long that maybe you haven't had him on the streams that you've been a part of. But maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know.
Maybe one of the earlier ones.
I think I might have been an audience member at some point. So there you have it. Just
a little shout out to Tuba Man. Who's been focusing on grad school, going to CMU next fall with Craig Knox, Carnegie Mellon University. With Craig Knox, who is the tuba player in the Pittsburgh Symphony, and is an amazing player. He's got a great album out where it's like the Di Lorenzo sonatas on there, and the Ploeg 3 miniatures is on there. There are a couple other things, I think, but those are the two standouts for sure, kind of headlining things. But yeah, Craig Knox is an amazing player, certainly. But yeah, I'm glad that grad school stuff worked out for you, and I think you'll be a great spot for the future. So let's see, are there any other comments? Kind of mostly just all saying hello to Tuba Man. Tuba Man's basically a celebrity around here, it looks like.
There you go.
Apparently he's Brady's uncle.
It can happen.
Not sure if I believe that, but but yeah, of course you get a shout out. But yeah, Tuba Man, that's definitely exciting. Craig Knox is one of those people that I've never gotten a lesson from, and maybe I will at some point, but it just hasn't ever been. Being East Coast, I'm like rarely on the East Coast, it feels like. So plus also just like tuba lessons are weird because it's so hard to like have your tubas or even a tuba when you're traveling or something. Like what am I gonna do? Just like fly over there and bring a tuba just to have a lesson? I mean, like that works, but
you can
do it.
But
I just kind of mostly stay in the center of the country, like all the way from north to south, but just like
just
no further than here, just like right in the center,
smack in the middle.
Right. But But yeah, it's definitely going to be a good time, and I've known some people that have gone to that school, and I've never heard a bad thing. So it's probably perfect. That's the only logical explanation.
There you go.
No school is perfect, but it's probably a very good place for you to study and to hone your skills on the tuba. But yeah, so maybe I'm trying to think. I have a couple other topics. Do you have any other topics that you want to go over, Connor?
I can't think of anything right now. I can probably drum up a few if we're thinking of some topics for discussion.
So maybe one that I was kind of thinking of, or Two Man's got a question. He's bailing us out. Two Man says, got a question. Do you ever do jazz tuba? What is a good start for that? That's a great question. And to be honest, I am not the jazz tuba expert. It's one of those things where, it seems like it should exist in the Venn diagram that is my playing. Someone who has tuba degrees and someone who has jazz degree. I only have one. But it's like there should be an intersection of jazz tuba. And it's not that I can't do it, but it's definitely not something I practice a lot and do a lot of. But I think that the best place to get started, because really your job as a tuba player in most scenarios is to play bass lines. And you need to learn how to play bass lines. You need to learn what makes sense. And I think a good starting place for that is just like traditional jazz, like Dixieland sort of stuff, because that's often what we're doing as tuba players. So maybe taking a recording of some Dixieland stuff that you really like and transcribing that. That's kind of where I would probably advise most people to start out, because you're probably not taking a bunch of solos on the tuba. I mean, it does happen, but in my experience, if you can play bass lines really well, you can gig doing, quote unquote jazz tuba things, which is mostly Dixieland things, but it can kind of branch out from there a little bit.
Or, depending on if you've got like a sousaphone setup, you could do like more like modern brass band type stuff. That would be adjacent,
right?
Would you say?
Oh yeah, it's definitely the next extension. And I think Two Man, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you have a Miraphone 186 as well, a B flat one, is that, or maybe it's a C. I can't remember. I'm sure he'll tell me. But I like to do that sort of stuff on B flat. Either sousaphone or a B flat tuba if possible. That's kind of my ideal situation, especially for me, because most of what I do with kind of improvised music is playing trombone. So that's in B flat, and it kind of helps my brain just a little bit. And also just playing sousaphone is kind of a nice thing for that sort of stuff. But everybody's got their own way of doing that sort of thing. And definitely you don't need to go out and buy an instrument just to do it. 186 is a C. Yeah, I misremembered. But maybe that still might be the best instrument for you out of the instruments that you have. If I do jazz tuba things on tuba, I tend to use my F, but I don't love it. I just use it mostly because my C is gigantic. If I had a small C like a 186, or it's not small, but my C is a 6/4 horn. What are you gonna say, Connor?
You reminded me of something. I played a gig with what's his name? Will Russell? Is that his name? Of
Yep.
Boston Brass. And he played the absolute snot.
Yeah, he plays an F tuba for most of the time, right?
Yeah, it was a screw bell. I think so, if I remember. That might have been a custom thing.
Yeah, it's a custom thing.
Man, that horn looked good, and he sounded great. And he was walking and playing changes and improvising all these tunes on an F tuba, and it just blew me away. It was absolutely
I've subbed for him in things before, and it's just like, I don't know if you're gonna get what you want. Especially I've subbed for him in a band that was his thing, and it also had a bass player, but they knew what each other was thinking all the time. It's just I'll show up. I don't really know. I don't know. Right. But yeah. Anyway, he plays on the Yamaha 621, I think is the model number. The small F tuba. Which is kind of a nice choice for that sort of stuff, and especially having the screw bell, and it's easy for him to travel, because that's a pretty small tuba, and that's its use case basically. It's really good for that sort of thing. But yeah, I I like playing F because it kind of lines up with B flat, and it's much more agile. If I had to play, some things, I like playing B flat better, just because thinking about playing in the key of, let's say, B flat, and you want to go down to a low F for a 5. It's like, that's fine. I mean, it works on the F tube obviously, but it's it's the pedal tone, and it's not exactly the same character as what I would want for the most part. But again, you got to play the instrument that you have. You've got 3 tubas, as far as I know, tuba man to choose from, and pick which one kind of works the best. And I know people who play C tuba for all that stuff because that's the tuba that they're the most comfortable with. So tuba man saying he's getting a sousaphone soon. Yeah, that's probably what I would use. And I actually have a sousaphone behind me. It's not mine, but it's what I use for that sort of stuff right now. If I have the opportunity. But Brady Mitchell has a few other things. Let's see. What's a good method for getting a large amount of air in a very small amount of time? For example, an eighth note rest amongst a ton of eighth notes. Playing tuba, by the way. That's kind of a tricky thing that it's just not. Playing tuba is not an ideal situation. That's ultimately what it comes down to. There's not really. That's something that you can practice. I hesitate to give very specific breathing advice over the internet. I think that sometimes that can do more harm than good. So I would probably not tell you to do too much other than what I tend to do with students, especially playing like an etude or something like that. I'll have them put things in separate phrases, and then I'll have them get their best breath, like stop after a phrase, get their best breath, and go again. There are some things that you can kind of do. You can practice the skill of getting air quickly, but ultimately it's about getting a good breath in general, and then trying to speed that up more than it is getting a good quick breath, in my opinion. Just one small thing that I'll say is, if it's a really high-pitched sound, you're probably not getting as much air as you could, because something is kind of obstructing things. So that's kind of, I try to get, if I'm thinking about it, which I really don't like to think about, I try not to get my students to think about their breathing. But if I'm going to, I try to think of almost a pitchless breath or a very low-pitched breath. Kind of the difference between and something like that. So, but yeah, I don't like going too deep into breathing, because to me, breathing kind of gets in that category of doing like medicine over the internet. It's just like, I don't really like, I feel like that gets potentially unhelpful pretty quickly. But
sure.
Do you have any comments, Connor? I kind of put a lid on it, but if you have some thoughts, you're definitely welcome to share them.
That's all right. I will say I have had several very productive telehealth phone calls with my primary caregiver or care provider recently. So
it wasn't actually a knock on that.
Just saying. All right. Don't knock it till you try it.
It's 2021. We do things differently now. I get it.
Living in the future. Yeah, right. Definitely. It's cool. But no, on the topic of breath stuff, I think that's a good general ethos for it, is like, it's working if you don't have to think about it.
Right. And especially with breathing, the more I've learned about breathing, the less I like to talk about it directly in lessons. In general, when I teach lessons, I don't always tell you exactly what I want you to do. I sometimes try to trick you, and breathing is the perfect example of that, because there's so much that you can say about breathing that makes things harder on the player, because then they start thinking about it and it just gets harder and harder to actually do. So I always try to make sure that I'm helpful, and I'm telling them things that are gonna is gonna help them play better, but maybe not being like 100%. Forethought, or what am I trying to say? Forward with it, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to give you all of what I'm thinking, and I think that that's ultimately, in my opinion, can be good teaching, is tricking you into doing the right thing. Because I just think that we all been breathing for a long time. You probably more or less know what you're doing. And if you don't, thinking about it is probably only going to make it harder. but that's my approach. People have different approaches, and there are people who are plenty successful who don't approach it that way. So, but I think ultimately breathing should like be something that you do with like a teacher that knows you.
For sure. And a good teacher, I think, is going to do something similar. I would say it may look like, from like the perspective of the one administering the private lesson, that you're hiding something or you're not talking about the breath. But in reality, I think it's more of a decision to focus on, we know what the musical line is. I want to focus on getting that musical line to actualize. And your body, the supercomputer meat mech that you're living in, is smart enough to discern the nuances of breath without you really having to deal with that. As long as our actual conscious intention is right now is sing the thing in your head. I know what I mechanically have to do. Go for it. I'm glad that I have some of the structures that I do now to alleviate bad habits in my playing as a professional now. But there are many times, especially in the past year, where I've done a lot of like deep diving into like performance practices. Mm-hmm. There were some things that I did as a high schooler or as a middle schooler of how I approached eliciting music out of myself. Maybe I wasn't hearing things as deeply as I am now, but there are certain things like breathing as an example that I wish I didn't think about it as much as I have in the time that I've studied my instrument. I liked how I intuitively did it as a kid, and I try to replicate that now by keeping some things simple in that regard and knowing that like intuition will largely flesh it out.
Right. Yeah, I think sometimes equipping a student with so much information about, I'm definitely not a medical professional or something, but I have some understanding of how the respiratory system works, and I don't talk about it in lessons. I don't think that, to me, that's that productive most of the time. I always kind of go back to sports analogies, which I need to get some different analogies, but all my analogies, any of my students can tell you, my analogies are either food or they're sports. And I know that there are other things in this world other than food and sports, but maybe the analogies work out really well a lot of the time. And what I think about with the sports connection is just, do you think that anyone that's an elite athlete playing a specific sport, choose anyone, everyone at home, think about your favorite athlete or something. And it's like, do you think that they think about what their body is doing when they're playing said sport? Do you think that like Serena Williams is thinking about how she's rotating her shoulder to serve? It's like, no, she's just trying to hit the ball, hit it hard, and have it go past the person on the other side of the net. Mm-hmm. I know it's not like it's that simple, but I don't think that she's thinking about, what muscles are engaging and disengaging and in what ways and, what tendons are doing things. That's just not how we interact with our bodies, I think.
I think what you're saying is analogous to a really good comment that Tuba Man just had that says he's thinking of breathing as like someone throwing an axe, which I think that's a great analogy. If you're stiff and you're thinking about, all right, clench my hands like my metatarsals, or that's your feet, carpals, right? Metacarpals. All right, cool.
Phalanges.
And stuff. See, this is exactly why we don't talk about it, because we're not medical professionals. I don't know what in the world I'm saying. But yeah, it's intuitive. And then there's that great book about archery that pretty much says a lot of this way more eloquently than we probably could. It was like Zen in the Art of Archery. It talks about like, don't focus on the minutia, get the intention. I think is kind of not to grossly and disrespectfully summarize a book in a sentence, but yeah, that I think we're all kind of going towards that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the, finding some kind of zen with it is really important, and not really worrying about those super, super specific details that I think just kind of, they tend to get in the way. They don't always get in the way, and for some people, those sorts of things work. And I'm the same sort of teacher when it comes to things of embouchure for the most part. It's like, that's a word that you don't hear me say in lessons. A student might say it, I'll almost never say it. I'm not saying it's a bad word. I'm not saying we can't say it. That's just something that I choose not to think about too often. It comes up, and it's not irrelevant information, but to me, I just don't think about those things quite as much. So yeah, I think we're kind of coming from it all from a pretty similar angle. And I think Two Man's got a good point. And one other thing that I'll throw out there is kind of like the opposite of what we want is like Charles Barkley's golf swing, which I know is a really specific reference. But that's someone to me that's like thinking about what they're doing way too much. And like if you watch his golf swing, it's kind of a train wreck because it just feels like his brain is stopping to think and do all these sorts of things. And I think that's how our breathing can sometimes be. We're like, and then we stop and then we let it go. And to me, that's not really conducive to doing things well. And that's just kind of my overall kind of thinking is that I really want to strive for really fluid, simple, thoughtless isn't the right word, but I don't want to have to like dedicate my brain to it. I want to think simple goals. I want to think about what I'm doing musically. But let's see. Brady Mitchell has another question. One more question. I'm auditioning for the $1 Million Band on Saturday and been trying to mentally prepare for it. What's the best type of mental prep you've experienced for a large audition? Do you want to go first with that? I'm going to look up what the $1 Million Band is because I'm unfamiliar.
Yeah, look that up. I'm excited to learn more. So yeah, well, good luck on the audition, or I should say play well. I would say as far as the best preparation, or what was it? To mentally prepare, so kind of like the head game of it all. I would say that the auditions that I felt the most comfortable with going into, there were two things that I did that I would say were the most effective. The first one is being super prepared and knowing everything backwards and forwards, and I would say that's 95% of the peace of mind of knowing that like I've done my work. That has calmed me down, So if you've been shedding and you're feeling good about it, then you should know that you've put in the time. Like you're ready to play this music, and that should make you feel good. You should be excited to go present this product that you've prepared with care to ears that are excited to hear it. So that's one thing to consider. The other thing that I do that I think has been the most effective thingy, aside from like my own preparation, or I might even put it as part of the preparation, is exposing myself to the idea of playing in front of people that are listening deeply to me. So having a friend come in the practice room and say, I'm going to play this excerpt for you. Because now it's not just, oh, I can redo it if it's bad. You've got to play it good right now. And that's going to make you nervous at first, probably more nervous than you think it would just playing for your friend. But it triggers that performance response. And the more you can do that for people that know you really, really well, the person that I want to play for the least on this entire planet, as far as like my own selfish like fear of embarrassment, would be my partner. I know that she knows my playing better than anybody on the planet Earth, and I know that she will tell me if I'm doing it wrong. So she knows
which lip slurs you're not doing.
She does, which is most of them. So I know that like she will be very honest with her feedback, and she knows how much I have or have not practiced. So I don't like playing in front of her when I know I'm playing for like a big audition, but I do that so that when I get there to the actual audition, it's just like, what? I already played for Christine. What do I care if I play for these guys? It's fine.
Right.
So that's exposure therapy, I think is what that's called.
Right. Yeah, I think that's definitely helpful. So I looked it up, and the $1 Million Band is the marching band at the University of Alabama. So I put that in the comments just so I could put this on here, Roll Tide. But yeah, so making, I think getting into a good mental space, and I always try to play for people. I remember in undergrad, especially when I was like taking my like first orchestral auditions, I would like get my friends together. I'd give them a list, and I would just tell them to like mess with me. It's like make me play it again and don't tell me why. Make me play it again and tell me to play it softer, even if that doesn't make sense. Tell me to play it again, or choose weird spot. Like I would just give them the pieces. I wouldn't even necessarily always tell them what the common excerpts from these pieces are if it wasn't specified in the orchestra, or just things like that. Just not, because that's kind of, especially when I did it with non-tuba players, it's kind of what you're getting on a panel. It's like you're not playing for tuba players usually. So I like to like kind of put panels together for myself, and I think that's pretty helpful. Let's see. Connor seemed to like what Two Man said. here's the thing about mental prep. You just have to constantly do these auditions, play for tons of people, imagine what it feels like to do it, always be in the spotlight what Connor said. And I think that, yeah, that's very true. And I think that's one of the things that's helped me with it is I perform a lot. And that's not something that you can easily just make happen. I mean, you can kind of simulate it with some of the things we're talking about. But for me, I definitely used to get I didn't get always that nervous, but I would get nervous when I'd improvise. That's probably where I would get nervous. Like that moment in a big band where you like stand up and you probably stood up too early for no reason. You just stood up and it's like you got 8 measures before you come in. And it's like, why did you stand up right now? You don't have to be that, Johnny on the spot. You can wait a little bit. And that's when like I would get nervous. But performing as much as I do now, I wouldn't say that it's mundane or anything like that, but it starts to get to the point where those sorts of nerves leave you. And I think just preparing a lot, and I've heard people do some like things like where they like run around the house and then play their audition music or something like that, to kind of make it simulate things, which that sort of thing. I played an audition where I was out of breath. When I took the Milwaukee Symphony audition, it was an old building, an old performance hall, and I brought 3 tubas like a fool. I was playing, I wanted to play Mahler 5 on B flat tuba because it just laid really well. I thought it sounded better. And so I played my F tuba, my C tuba, and I was borrowing I had a long-term loan on a B flat at that time. And so I brought all 3 of them, and it was a really long walk with stairs, and I foolishly gave the person, the person who's helping me out, I gave them my F tuba, the smallest and lightest one. So I had a B flat tuba in one hand, a C tuba in the other, and it was just like an absolute nightmare. And I just was like out of breath, and I felt terrible, and I didn't do well in that audition. And that probably, hurt me in that way. So doing things like that sometimes can be very helpful. Just like running around the house, getting your heart rate up, those sorts of things. Well, we're probably going to call this stream pretty soon here, so if you have any final comments, or questions, please get them in. We've got to call it pretty soon here. Any closing thoughts on your end, Connor?
No, I think it's a good point. Just trying to simulate the audition process in any way possible. I did that one time where I ended up not having to play out of breath, but I got really out of breath right before the second time I played in the American Trombone Workshop Jazz Competition, because I wanted to go visit and experience the Arlington Cemetery, which is directly next to Fort, I don't want to say the incorrect one, the fort where they have the Army base where the bands play and all of that stuff, where the conference was. Foolishly, I didn't know, for whatever security level they were at that time, you could not enter into the base through the connecting part of Arlington Cemetery. So I walked through all of Arlington Cemetery to the end, to the back. And there was a big scary guy with a gun who said, "You cannot come through this way." And I said, "Okay." And I had to fast walk through Arlington Cemetery and pay for a cab that I didn't have money for, and go all the way around town to the other side of the fort. It was a whole ordeal, and I was sweaty. But by that time, I was not sweaty that I wanted to play. But then I just got sweaty because I was nervous. But enough about my sweat. It was a really fun concert. I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Yeah. So we've got a couple last minute things. Last question from Brady, tips for sight reading. So, my answer for sight reading most of the time is mostly just you have to be doing it. But doing it, I like to think about, don't just start with the craziest, hardest thing. Start with things that you're likely to be relatively successful in. Playing duets with people. If you have the newer version of the Arbenz book, if you flip to the back, it has all those duets. That's a good starting place. So just playing duets with people. That's something I did a lot of. But really, ultimately, sight reading comes down to just doing it a lot. And, sometimes sight reading is really important. Sometimes it's not at all important. It just kind of depends on the situation. But yeah, I think just spending some time doing it. And kind of, at some level, especially with rhythms, there are only so many rhythms out there. You'll see them all, within reason. Maybe you won't see every dodec tuplet in the world, but you'll see every common 4/4 rhythm at some level. Do you have any thoughts before we get to this last?
Yeah, my final comment here would be, if you do want to read every rhythm, buy Louis Bellson's Modern Reading Text in 4/4.
I have that one.
Play it all the way through, then play through it again, playing your scales in an octave, and every single time you move from exercise 1 to exercise 2, go up a fourth. And then once you can do that, start doing it in sequences where the first time you exercise number 1 is in F within an octave in thirds. The next time exercise number 2, you're in B flat and you're in scales in fourth within an octave, and so on and so forth. And you will be a sight reading animal by the time you get done with that.
Yeah, that's definitely a great book. I forgot about that book. I haven't used it in a long time. But yeah, we got some other comments in there, but we'll let them go. But yeah, thank you everyone for watching today's stream. I hope you had a good time. I think both of us definitely had a good time interacting with everybody. And just a reminder that if you want to get on that Discord channel or Discord server, there you can follow that link. And we've got, it's a growing community, and there's definitely some good kind of learning and things that are happening there. And I'm pretty active on there. I try to answer every question that I see. My phone rings, so I don't really have a good excuse. But yeah, and then also if you want one of these T-shirts or other merchandise, we can't show you the water bottle because Connor didn't bring it today.
Oopsie.
But so the water bottle no longer exists, I guess. But anyway, if you're interested in any of those things, follow that link that's also in the description. And we will both see you next week at the same bat time, same bat channel.
That's right.
All right. Till next time.
Yep. Bye, friends.